we'll throw them in a room, they'll make 50 million calls a day, and that'll drive new logo. That just doesn't really scale anymore like it used to. I mean, maybe, I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. We still have a really strong BDR program and opportunity there. But the idea that you can just hire another BDR and you're always going to get more and more productivity out of it, it just feels less and less likely because the market is just so inundated and saturated. It's hard to get anyone's attention.
Welcome to Revenue Insights. We're joined by revenue leaders from some of the highest growth companies. Together, we explore how they built their revenue teams, the journeys they've been on, and the lessons they've learned along the way. Revenue Insights is brought to you by Ebsta. We're an AI-first revenue intelligence platform designed to help you close more deals, retain more customers, and forecast better. Enjoy the podcast.
Hello, everybody. On today's episode of the Revenue Insights podcast, I'm thrilled to have Mikey Abts, Vice President of Sales at Recast Software. Mikey has built his career helping sales teams consistently uncover and generate high-value opportunities from his time at SAP Concur to Nintex, and now leading sales at Recast. With a deep focus on empowering sales teams to drive revenue through proactive, strategic engagement, Mikey combines practical tactics with modern, data-informed approach. Today, we'll dive into how he creates and scales sales-generated opportunities, ensuring teams consistently deliver measurable impact. So without further ado, welcome to the podcast, Mikey.
Awesome, Guy. I'm excited to be here, and thanks for having me.
So before we get started, perhaps you could give us all a little bit of an introduction as to what you're currently doing and perhaps a little bit of information about kind of how you got there.
Yeah, let's kind of start with what I'm currently doing, and I've had a bit of a strange background, so I can give the high notes on that. But yeah, I'm currently Vice President of Sales at Recast Software. We sell software in the IT space, particularly to system administrators. As Vice President, it's new logo, current customer reps, also the BDRs fall under me, and the solution engineers, and covering most of the globe except a few parts of Europe where we've made acquisitions.
Very exciting. And how long have you been part of that team?
Yeah, so I'm coming up on 2 years here. A lot of movement really quick, which is crazy, but it's also something, I really enjoy.
Excellent. And tell us a bit about how you got there. What were you doing in your last role?
Yeah, I guess kind of starting at the beginning back in the day, I actually originally went to law school and I worked in patent litigation at sort of a larger firm. Kind of very quickly realized like that wasn't the path for me. I think kind of like maybe a lot of salespeople, I thought the law would just be me kind of in court giving arguments and speeches. And then I quickly realized that's, a tiny part of it, right? It's a lot of back-end paperwork. So I ended up kind of transitioning out of that. And really, I guess what I would call my first kind of sales role was I got into a space called litigation finance. And really, litigation finance is calling legal cases like an asset. So basically, Guy, let's say you were going to sue me, but you needed $1 million to sue me. But if you won, you'd win 20 million bucks. Well, maybe you don't have $1 million. So then what you do is you can go to a hedge fund, a private equity group, a wealthy individual and say, hey, I've got a good case here. If you guys pay the $1 million, when I win the 20 million, you guys can take 10 million. So I would broker between different finance groups and then people that had cases that needed funding. And so it's really true sales, right? I had to talk to finance groups about what this even was, talk to lawyers and plaintiffs and say, hey, you got a good case, and then bring the two together. And that was kind of my intro to sales. And I was just doing it on my own. So I learned a lot kind of making it up as I go.
Wow. That's a fascinating market to be in. I'm sure you've got plenty of stories of court cases that went really well and perhaps others that didn't.
Yes, absolutely. Right. Like, as you know, the cases can go in any direction. And I guess as we know in the software sales world, timing matters a lot. And, sometimes a legal case can go on 4, 5, 6 years, which isn't ideal for investors, right?
Absolutely. So you moved on from there, and what did you do next?
Yeah. So from there, I ended up actually meeting a kind of wealthy individual who had his own family office, and he was like, "Hey, let's do litigation finance, and let's try to do utility scale solar investments." So basically developing really large scale solar fields and then typically selling them to like, a Google or a Microsoft that needs a lot of power, often for like a data center, but they also want to go green. They don't want to take a ton of bad energy off the grid. So we ended up actually starting a solar energy company that went well for a while, and then it kind of went topsy-turvy. That kind of ended up completely skidding off the map and folding. And I was like, okay, this has been fun, but I think I want to do something maybe a little more predictable. And then so jumped into sales at SAP Concur, and that was kind of the beginning of my software sales career.
Got it. Okay, so you decided to step into software sales as a safer option.
Yeah, and I think also to learn what even a typical corporate sales job and process looks like, right? Like a more entrepreneurial role is what I like. And I think that's kind of why I've ended up even at Recast and more in early stage software. But I think first I needed to learn as well, like if you're at an SAP, a Microsoft, a Google, like what does that look like? How are territories structured? What is the typical sales process? So SAP Concur is as dialed in as like any software company in terms of just like, here's how you find prospects, here's what you say and what that sales process looks like. So learned a ton there of just like standard format and process.
So it was a really good stables, somewhere where you really learned your craft at SAP Concur.
Yeah, I did both. New logo there, learned a ton there. Also did current customer. So it's nice that I got to understand, how you drive revenue on both of those sides. And then a gentleman named Ben Brewer, who was running sales there, ended up going and taking over as CRO of Nintex. And then when he went over there, he introduced me to some people, and I ended up making the transition over to Nintex, running their enterprise sales for current customers initially.
Very good. And you were there for about 3 years now, is that right?
Yep, there, and kind of ended up doing both current customer and new logo, like leading that from a leadership perspective. And Nintex is private equity owned. Tomer Bravo was the main investor when I showed up there. And then they had a large exit to TPG. I think this is public, a little over $2 billion.
Very good. Well, that's another notch on your resume. Getting be part of a team that's achieved such a big exit. That's fantastic. And is that when you moved to Recast?
Yeah. So soon, kind of after that, I'm sure there's a lot of people on this line knows, big exit, big investors, and there was a lot of change, right? Most of the C-suite changed, a lot of the different structures changed. My boss at Nintex was a gentleman named Phil Long. He went and took over as CRO of Recast Software I am today. Initially, he was running marketing, sales, NCS. That's changed a little bit as we've grown. And then he brought me over to do my current role running sales here.
There's definitely a theme here, which is, find really good leaders and then follow them around from one place to the next.
For me, probably the number one thing, if I really think about it, and I was talking to a gentleman I work with the other day as kind of a executive coach, and he was asking me to rank like different things, like, what do you sell? How much money do you make? What's the purpose behind it? Who do you work with? And I really thought about it for a long time. It wasn't something I'd really ordered. And I think when I really broke it down, the number one thing for me is who do I work with? Like that's the thing I've learned over all these things. Like even if you're selling the best product and making a bunch of money, like if you don't gel and fit with the people you work with, like it's probably going to be pretty brutal day in and day out. So for me, that's always number one.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And look, those that have followed the podcast will know that we've recently become, Ebster has recently become part of Fullcast. And one of the big drivers for me in joining that leadership team was the caliber of the people that we get the opportunity to work with. It's in a bootstrap business, it's always very difficult to surround yourself with world leaders. But when you get the opportunity to work with with people that have just been there, seen it, done it, that are able to, and also really good people, it just inspires you to get up every morning, and it helps you to work towards really big goals, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree. And Nintex was a big acquisition company. Sounds like obviously you're in the middle of it. And I feel like we saw a lot of the good, bad, and the ugly, right? Of some acquisitions went amazing, some somewhere in between. And I think so much of it was was there a symbiosis in the people and the cultures? Because every company is pretty different. But when you find that fit, it can really be exponential.
Yeah, no, I agree. Absolutely agree. Right, let's jump into your area of expertise. We're seeing more and more of this in the market where driving sales-generated opportunities is becoming more and more of a challenge for front office teams. So can you walk us through your playbook or processes for consistently identifying and creating and converting these opportunities?
Yeah, I think so. I think we should maybe think about, obviously new logo and then the current customer side of the business. I guess there's just a little asterisk. I'm a big believer in separating those two. I'm not a big fan of reps with dual roles, which we could talk about. But, starting with the new logo piece, I think a lot of people on here will feel this way, and I'm sure, Guy, you do as well, is, when you look at software initially, in the early days, Salesforce really created a lot of the model where they were like, hey, we'll hire a bunch of BDRs, we'll throw them in a room, they'll make 50 million calls a day, and that'll drive new logo. That just doesn't really scale anymore like it used to. I mean, maybe, I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. We still have a really strong BDR program and opportunity there. But the idea that you can just hire another BDR and you're always going to get more and more productivity out of it, it just feels less and less likely because one, the market is just so inundated and saturated. It's hard to get anyone's attention. I mean, who's really even answering phone calls that much? Who's answering these emails? Again, there's important work there, but I think you got to be a little bit more strategic about it than that. So when I think about new logo, there's really kind of a few cores I always think about. Is one, ideally, I'm a big fan of creating some sort of freemium or community model or usage, right? Just to get people in the door and using, and then also really trying to bring them a lot of value on the front end. I think sometimes when people deliver a freemium model, they are afraid of giving away too much. But in my opinion, the more people you can get on it, the better, that are using it the longer. And then you'll really start to grow a community and people that are getting immense value that you can convert. Whereas if you give away something that isn't that valuable and nobody cares about, yeah, maybe you didn't give away too much, but how are you really going to grow that? So a big thing for me, I'm always thinking about is how can we work with our product and marketing team to figure out different ways we can provide freemium value and then rally webinars and promotions around driving people to a free tool.
This episode is sponsored by MailTrap, an email delivery platform built for product companies that send at scale. Go for high inboxing rates. Try today at mailtrap.io.
I really like that. Where it's possible, of course, you always want to find a way of giving before you get. And I think for some businesses, it's a freemium model or a free trial experience. The challenge as you move up to mid-market and beyond is that a lot of organizations have got things kind of locked down. And more of the technology that's out there needs to plug into what you've already got. And that can be a real barrier. And sometimes actually getting the customer to pay isn't the hardest thing on the list, right? You've got to get through legal and security and privacy and implementation and change management and. So, but I think the product is only one thing that you can give away. We've done a really my marketing team have done a great job this year, really expanding out our footprint with our benchmark report. So now it seems to be really popular. I think we've had over 3,000 companies now download the report. And we get lots of questions and and people love the insights. And while it's not the product itself, it gets people thinking about being much more data driven in the way that they operate their go-to-market motion. And hopefully it presents ourselves as those kind of subject matter experts. And when they are in the market, we get the opportunity to have that conversation. But I absolutely buy into the principle that we all want to be able to, we all should be trying to give to the community better than before we receive. And what's really interesting is one of the things we do for customers is we give every quarter, they get an audit of their whole go-to-market motion in a report we call REAS. And one of the really interesting data points that people lean into is looking at source. Where did we get our leads from that convert? And time again, you can see that partner channel giving the highest possible kind of sales velocity on those deals. So maybe we don't get that many deals through partners, but the ones that we do, they close quickly and we get a really high conversion rate. And the deal values are usually pretty high as well. When we look at the deals coming in through the inbound team, usually we see a lot of volume. So they're generating what they perceive as sales qualified leads. But when we look at the conversion rates, when we look at the velocity or the dollars per day we get it from the deals generated from those outbound teams, it's usually the worst conversion rates of all. Even lower than inbound traffic coming in through paid adverts, for example. So relationships really do drive revenue, and I think what we try to do is, and we do have 360 sellers. They're not responsible for generating all of their own opportunities, but the ones that they do have a target of self-generated leads that they are responsible for generating, and we encourage them to get to events. Go and meet people in your community, go and shake hands, go and build relationships, because it's one of the things that the AI is never going to be able to do for us. But it's something that we really need to encourage our sellers to be spending more time customer facing and engaging with those prospects.
Yeah, I think you really nailed it on a few different points there, which is, one, it's going to determine on what you're selling and what your product is, what you can give away. But there's going to be something you can give away, whether it's like a report. Ideally, what I'm always trying to find is there a way we can get data from them, whether it's their usage of a freemium product, somehow a report that can tie into what they know, something they can fill out. It can be tricky with security requirements, but sometimes we can actually get into their system and actually provide them with something valuable that states, hey, based on your actual company and data, here's the value that we will provide and why it makes sense to ultimately purchase the software from us in a justified way. Like, you guys have seen, I'm sure every company is people want a data-driven approach that they can really articulate, and we need to give that to them. We need to make it incredibly easy for them to buy and pitch internally. And when we basically just give them some generic information that, hey, this will be more efficient and save time, it just doesn't really land or resonate much anymore.
I absolutely buy into that. And if you can talk the customer's language, if you're actually referring to their individual sellers or their specific use case, they're much more likely to buy into it and relate to the business case themselves. So I absolutely buy into that. Up until in our world, we're really focused on how do we get more sellers hitting quota, and how do we deliver a really accurate forecast in a much more consistent way? And the harsh reality is it's not a difficult solution. It's not a difficult thing to achieve, but there aren't any shortcuts. And you start with the data, you convert it into insights, you then need some sort of technology platform to give you some structure, and then you need a change agent. And for us, we launched our own kind of services wrapper around that. We called out these RES reports. But it was a real heavy lift. We had to get the customer implemented. We had to get them activated. We had to get their data on our platform before we could deliver them these insights. We literally about 3 months ago, we now are in a position where we can offer REAS as a standalone service. And it's unlocked so much opportunity because the customer doesn't need to commit to buying licenses. They don't need to commit to the change management. And we're able to give them that holistic view of everything that's going on in their go-to-market motion and what they need to prioritize to get more sellers hitting quota. And they get that kind of as a one-off report before they have to make any big buying decisions. And it's been transformational for us, shortened our sales cycle, increased the average deal values, and increased our win rates.
Yeah, because it gives you to a really nice call to action, right? Like oftentimes you'll go to a webinar or people will be going to a conference and then it's like, what next? Well, it's like, well, why don't you buy our software? I think they call it foot in the door theory, is like, hey, this is a pretty, low risk, easy way to get some value. And now we're starting to build into the sales cycle. But if we're going back to what we were talking about at the beginning, where it's BDR cold call someone and ask for a demo, it can be done, but boy, is that tough, right? Whereas you can deliver them some sort of value, a simple call to action, have something marketing, product, and sales can rally around. Like now we could start moving things through the funnel. So that's a really important kind of pillar I like to start with. And then another big part for me is when BDRs and reps are outbounding, how do we do that in an intelligent way, right? Not just a spray and pray. So one, I'm always looking at different softwares that provide signaling. I've used a bunch at this point. One that I'm using right now is called User Gems. And basically, right, we've built a bunch of different signals of, okay, they previously bought us, they're at a new company. That's one. We've also built signaling around if they're using a free version of our product and they hit certain levels of activity and using certain actions within it, that signals a high propensity to buy. Companies that are hiring IT sysadmins, strong predictor of buying for us. That's another signal we have in here. Companies that are growing, and ideally, we start stacking these signals. So the higher quality signals that stack together, those flow to our AEs and reps to go into sequences and flows. The other signals, maybe that have a lower propensity to buy, those flow to our BDRs. But now instead of just targeting the whole world, we're being really thoughtful about who we're reaching out to and based on the signaling, what that messaging looks like.
I really like that. So you take responsibility for defining ICP at kind of at the top level, and then you're looking at all of these different signals. And it's only when they have a certain stack of signals that the frontline sellers, the BDRs and the AEs get access to those leads. And is that about right?
That's exactly right. We're actually able to kind of funnel it into, like a score, like you've probably seen before. And yeah, anything over 80. We have go to reps, anything under goes to BDRs, but that has to meet a certain propensity to flow to a BDR as well.
What do you expect in return? Is there a turnaround time that you expect them to hit, or a minimum number of outreaches, or a certain number of sales generated opportunities they need to generate each month? What's the line in the sand for you guys?
Yeah, so kind of a few things is, one, we have kind of X amount of leads with like a cap on it because we want it to be manageable, but we want them to be worked, really well. So I'm trying to think offhand, but I think it ends up being like maybe 10 to 15 new accounts. Sometimes those will have 3 to 4 contacts within it. Ideally are flowing to the new logo reps, much deeper for the BDRs. I think that ends up being like 30 or 40. Those actually automatically flow into a sequence that has the content written, both for what the emails will look like and what they should say on a phone call. So it's pretty like, I don't want to say idiot proof, but it gives you something to jump off on right away. Once we get a better handle on conversions over time, I'm really interested to then figure out like, what is a reasonable expectation? I don't think we have enough data yet to really understand what that should look like.
So how do you balance that kind of sales generated opportunities with the energy that they're expected to spend on existing pipeline or partner channels? Is there a 60-40 split, or is it are you just leaving it to the individual AEs to prioritize their own time?
Yeah, I mean, outside of capping the amount of leads, because when we added up both how many leads they'll get each week and then how many phone calls that looks like, we're like, all right, this seems like a reasonable expectation, but not overloading them. But also, like, sometimes these things just become, all right, we got to start somewhere, and then we can kind of bend the model as it adapts.
Yeah, understood. So do you find it difficult to motivate the sales team to think more like hunters than farmers, especially in the kind of enterprise accounts where opportunities might not be as obvious?
Absolutely. So, I mean, I think that's one reason why I like the people focusing on current customer, focusing on new logo, because what I found in other structures where I've had it both is, reps are smart. They always take whatever's the easiest path to value. And at some companies, actually the current customer motion, like they feel like there's some simple stuff there. So that's where they focus. Or maybe they have decent lead flow, new logo, and they don't really care about the current customer. Similar to doing a BDR, SDR division versus inbound and outbound, I really like to have people focused on one thing so that they have to get good at that and don't kind of take the easiest path to value. In terms of getting new logo people to focus on generating their own outbound, I think that's always a challenge, right? I think especially when I first came to Recast, it had a pretty strong inbound engine, which is one of the main reasons I wanted to come here. But like any company, as we start to scale, start to try to hit more and more numbers, right? We're scaling up the amount of reps we have, the amount of inbound that maybe those reps had initially where they didn't really have to do any outbound, like now they do. So yeah, it's fundamentally a cultural change. I'm very much, at least always trying to initially motivate by the carrot, right? So lots of spiffs, lots of contests, lots of things to just try to make it where, hey, that's actually fun both to close deals, but also like to really get rewarded for doing the right activities. Ideally, once they do that enough, it just becomes a habit.
Yeah, sellers love a leaderboard. It's fair to say, and incentives definitely drive the right behavior. You just got to make sure that you're not incentivizing the wrong thing. But and I've made a lot of those mistakes over the years. But so, do you have internal RevOps, and if so, how do you work with them? And do you see the data analytics team enhancing your ability to identify potential opportunities that might otherwise be missed by the sales team?
Yeah, so kind of a few thoughts on that. So one of the things that was nice about when I came to Recast is also the COO that was formerly at Nintex ended up coming here as well, who's a really talented RevOps professional. We do use Salesforce, we do use Gong, and I've always been deeply interested in how to apply AI to what we're doing. I'm not saying I'm the best at it, but a lot of things I'm working on. And one of the things I've really just kind of kicked off in the last few weeks is, I guess taking one step back, we're a deep Microsoft shop because the products we sell fundamentally enhance Microsoft products. Not to go too deep into it, but Microsoft has Intune and SCCM in the IT space. We are kind of add-ons to those. So everything we do runs through Microsoft. So we have Copilot licenses. Gong was able to just finally release a beta connector of all the Gong data and transcripts into Copilot. Was also able to just set up a Salesforce connector as well. The reason that's been kind of interesting, I'm starting to play around with it, is with Copilot Researcher, just fundamentally just like, if you've used DeepThink or researching on ChatGPT, you can actually stack all the data pulls out of Salesforce with all the Gong transcripts and start asking it some really interesting questions about what's historically happened. You can even ask about specific reps and where you're going. So I'm excited to play around with that, but I certainly haven't mastered it yet. I'm very early days on that. In general, in terms of data, the thing to me about AI, there's so many use cases, but it's more like there's so much data in the world. Finally, there's some way to start sorting through it. Maybe not perfectly, but if you're someone like me moving really, really fast. So I feel like I'm still just scratching the surface on what can be done.
Yeah, I've been playing around with some different agents, and every time I create one, I need to split it into more than one, and we end up playing around with it. I think that there's a concern, I suppose, if we allow the sellers to get too into that, and again, it's another distraction from being customer facing. So, do you allow your sellers to have access to and play with these AI models and agents, or is it really something that you define and then kind of give to them once it's at that stage?
Yeah, great question. So kind of a couple different things is from the sort of high level of like Copilot integrating with Gong and Salesforce. Right now, that's just something I'm doing with the leaders. Maybe someday that'll change, but again, yeah, I don't want them to go too those things. But in terms of a sales process perspective, we do use ChatGPT. We have licenses for the sellers. We also have licenses for a lot of our sellers to use Gamma. I don't know if you ever use Gamma to create PowerPoint decks, but it's a fantastic product. You can actually build your own branding into it. And something, I really like to do is, turn off all the training like for the reps. So it's not training the models, try to keep all the data as private as possible. But you can flow in the transcripts from sales cycles, have that create the content for PowerPoint decks. You can then copy and paste that content into Gamma, and it'll spit out a pretty beautiful presentation in your branding instantly. And you can create a really nice sales process from intro to demo to close that looks really good. It's pretty dialed in.
Yeah, I'm just making a note of that. I spend my life building decks, so knowing that there's an AI out there that can do it for me is definitely something I'm going to look into. So appreciate that.
You will love it because I'm a deck guy, like just decks all the time. And I used a lot of the different tools out there and they were just frustrating. Gamma, I'm a big fan on. I think you'll get it right away.
Excellent. Oh, I can't wait. That's really good to hear. Okay, so we allow the reps access to ChatGPT and so on, but we don't allow it to kind of gather the information. And it sounds like you're limiting the leadership data, the AI tools that you're working to, just to the leadership team. The one use case that we found really powerful was really all around qualification. So we've plugged in an AI bot so we'll plug into a Gong call recorder or a Zoom or a Teams, and we've got a widget in Salesforce where we will populate whatever the methodology is that they're using for qualification. So let's say they're using MEDPIC, we'll populate the MEDPIC for them and score it. And we found it to be one of the key drivers to improve conversion rates. Not necessarily at the conversion rates of leaving discovery, because people seem to skip through that quite quickly, but the positive impact on late stage win rates is reduction of slippage at late stage by asking those qualifying questions, and more importantly, allowing the AI to highlight back to the seller what parts of the qualification maybe they haven't dived into well enough. Have they really identified that critical event? Do they know that they've got a budget? Do we understand who these economic buyers are? Who's going to be in the buying committee? And when the AI is prompting the seller and not allowing them to leave that discovery phase until those questions are answered, we've seen that have a big impact on consistency, on qualification, and ultimately lead to better win rates and shorter sales cycles down the road. So I think there's some really interesting kind of single purpose AI models that you can use that can be really powerful for the sellers. And it doesn't need to be all singing, all dancing, but it can take away some of the real admin burden on the seller and give the leadership team a lot more visibility as to actually what's been going on and where the seller might need some training.
That's super interesting to me. So just even thinking about that, I guess, how does it inform the seller? Like, where are they getting this information from? So let's say you had MEDPIC. I assume it's then looking at the transcripts of the different calls. Is it in Salesforce? Is it emailing them afterwards and being like, you should have done this? Like, how does that, I guess, work?
So, first of all, I think we're unique in the fact that when we onboard a customer, we can go through the last year's worth of call recordings and associated calls to deals that closed, won, and lost. So what we're looking for is how well or badly a certain seller's qualifying and what impacts that having on outcomes for over the previous 12 months. And that helps to train the model. And then we had this widget that we hold that we capture the data in is a Salesforce widget, or for customers that are using HubSpot, we've got a HubSpot widget. So where it gets clever is when the RevOps team decide to use the scores within the qualification widget to gate the ability to move from one stage to the next. And they have to get permission to override that from the manager. And that in itself has given them the consistency. And you only need a couple of, you finished your phone call, you get a green thumbs up, you're allowed to lead discovery. Fantastic. You only need a couple of red thumbs down before you actually change the way you do your discovery. And because you kind of crave that green thumbs up because you want to move forward. And so we've seen it a much better training tool by gamifying it than necessarily sitting people in a training room showing them how to fill out the MEDPIC or how to game the system.
I like that a lot. That's really clever.
The AI is certainly nowhere near as broad as someone like a Gong, because I know they do some really cool things with the call recordings. But it's really focused on that qualification question and scoring it consistently across. You might have 100 sellers, and you may have run 1,000 sales processes over the last year, but having that consistent view and understanding, look, seller X is consistently underperforming when it comes to identifying that critical event. So we know specifically we can give them that training and use that as a gate to not allow them to progress without clarifying that point with the customer or the prospect.
Yeah, and to that point, what I also like about it, and something we found really helpful, is when using call recordings and things to provide feedback to sellers. Like even just upload a transcript and say, hey, what were the top 5 things I did wrong or right here? I find, and this is probably just true of all humans, people are actually more open to taking the feedback from the AI. Sometimes it feels maybe personal coming from a manager, but the AI said 5 times in a row, like, they're not doing this. And they're kind of like, yeah, that's right. And I think there's almost something about the green thumbs up too. It's like, well, this is pretty just data driven and I don't have anyone to argue with. It probably lands a little cleaner.
Yeah, and of course they get an opportunity to fix it before they sit with their manager. So they can, I identified this problem, this is what I did about it, and look, I've got my green thumbs up now. So it kind of gives them that opportunity to win, and getting the seller and the leader looking at the same data points and identifying the same weaknesses in the process. It means that it turns the pipeline inspection meetings into much more consistent conversations about what could be done better, rather than allowing the seller just to take over and talk about how great they are and how much they love them and they're definitely going to buy.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, thinking about I guess, you guys and Forecast and all these players in the space, it's like, I can almost imagine some tool, right? Where it's, it finds a bunch of signals, those pop up to a seller of, hey, reach out with this information. Then the call is giving them lots of feedback on what the discussion should look like. That's updating the CRM. It's going into Gamma, maybe creating the PowerPoint decks for the next call with talk tracks already built into it. Like, I can imagine a pretty beginning to end workflow we're probably building towards right now in this kind of AI application era.
I agree. I think that the tech in revenue operations is going to be transformed over the next 3 years. And I don't think you'll be able to recognize it to what it is today. And part of the reason that we chose to join Forecast. So, Mike, as we look ahead, what do you see as the biggest shifts in how sales teams will generate opportunities over the next 3 to 5 years?
Interesting. I mean, probably touching on what we were talking about before on the AI piece. When I think about, when I first was entering sales, the amount of admin time was massive. I even think when you look at stats, I think it's still undervalued of how high it is. And not only that, the level which that admin time is kind of like, it's a lot of jumping back and forth. It can be kind of frustrating. And when you look at really the modern era, even with a lot of these tools, I think the average software rep is still spending a ton of time generating quotes, figuring out who to reach out to, planning for next calls, updating their forecast. And not only will AI be able to do these things faster, I think it'll do them better, right? And that'll bring a lot more consistency across the org when it comes to forecasting and planning. And I think it sounds like a nicer life for reps, right? That it's really going to come down to your ability to make relationships, run strong discoveries, really know enough to be consultative and push things forward, and then figure out how to frame up pricing proposals and negotiations.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, with the benchmark report we just produced, we could see that average sellers are spending just 2 hours a day customer facing, while our top performers at nearly just under 50% of their time is now speaking to customers. So it's like one of those golf adages, right? The more you practice, the luckier you get, and the more time we spend talking to customers and prospects, guess what? The more pipeline we generate and the more deals we close. And I think we've almost got to get out of our own way and really free the sellers up to spend more and more of their time building those relationships, getting customer facing. And guess what? If you speak to 3 customers a day, you are going to generate more revenue than the seller sitting next to you that's only speaking to 2 customers a day.
I mean, it's just basic math. You got to swing the bat.
Exactly. And everything has changed, but actually nothing's changed, right? We absolutely still need to kind of do that. But look, I think I heard a really wise man say the other day that we can have all of this experience and all of this knowledge under our belts, but the truth is that none of us are sold in 2026. None of us have sold in 2027. And so we're not quite sure what the future is going to hold and how we're going to get there. But I think by being inquisitive, by being curious, by looking at these latest tech tools and looking at and having these conversations about how people are doing things, we've got our best possible chance of winning.
I completely agree. And, maybe I'm slightly biased on this, but I think there's so much exciting stuff in the more early stage companies. It's a part I've really enjoyed working on because it's always challenging, but it's always pressing you to come up with new ideas. But when you think about what we're talking about, which is fundamentally, how do we take software and more hard coding that's still going to be there? How does that fuse with generative AI and different AI applications? And once people really figure out how to dial in those use cases with humans in the loop, I think you're going to see most businesses transformed. I'm really bullish on the next 5 to 10 years for people who are in this space. Like, I think there's so many applications that are yet to be uncovered, and it's going to completely transform the way a lot of these companies operate. I think people aren't even aware of how transformative it's going to be.
Yeah, I absolutely buy into that. I think the way people buy, the way people sell is going to change in so many ways. But ultimately, if your activity levels are high, if you're engaging with customers and prospects more than your peers, you will win more than your peers.
100%.
Well, listen, Mikey, I've really enjoyed our conversation. I can't believe how fast the time has gone. But if anyone in the community wants to reach out to you and connect, how would they do that?
Best way is on LinkedIn. Mikey Abts, Mikey, last name Abts, kind of a weird spelling.
Fantastic. Well, I'm sure they'll reach out to you, and if they mention the podcast, I'm sure you'll be happy to accept their invites. So thank you so much for all your time today and all of your insights. Really enjoyed the conversation, and good luck with the future.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Guy.
Thank you.
Great to connect.
Thanks for listening to Revenue Insights from EBSTA. If you want to learn more from some of the brightest minds on how to predictably and efficiently grow revenue, then subscribe to our newsletter. We'll deliver actionable insights straight to your inbox. Go to ebsta.com/newsletter. See you soon.